Welcome to the European Ham Radio Show. And today we're going to talk about repeaters, or more correctly, George down here is going to probably teach us a little bit about how repeaters work and that there's probably no magic involved in it. But first of all, a couple of announcements, and then we're going to go to the ham radio moment of the week for us. But first of all, we got a new member of the European Ham Radio Show, or he's not new, but we've decided to make him a permanent member, and that's Sean, Ham Radio Dude. He's now a permanent member of the show together with Walt, and Walt will be back next week. So then hopefully we'll be 6 people on stream, actually. Besides that, Chet is going to have a little bit of a segment on how to check in by WinLink at the end of the show, so make sure you stay for that. And I guess then it's the ham radio moment of the week. And Kjetil, what's your ham radio moment of the week?
I've had some amazing SOTA and POTA activations this week. We've had stunning weather for September. We've had close to 20 degrees Celsius. It's been sunny, little wind and everything. So just beautiful. And I did a SOTA activation after work, hiked up to a tiny hill, just like one of the really easy ones. And I brought the cooking equipment and I made an amazing hamburger on the top, which I ate while doing FT8 on SOTA. So you can see that was like one of the more enjoyable SOTA expeditions I've ever had. So
nice.
I think that's my moment of the week.
That is a good moment. And you're pretty much in the middle of a really nice ham radio moment as well now. Outside with a campfire?
Yes, this is a live fire, and the wind has picked up and turned direction directly towards my laptop. So if I start running, then it's just because it started blowing a lot more than I expected. And then I'll just go into the cabin behind here and be back in a few minutes. So
the excitement of live streaming on YouTube.
Yes.
Jeff's got a question for you here in the chat. He wants to know if you're roasting HTs.
No, I'm not. I ran out of hand terminals at the moment, sadly, but I do have my tool here. So you may see me chopping some wood during the stream to put on the campfire.
I'm so glad that you're bringing essential ham radio tools like an axe, Kjetil.
Can be used for many things.
Yeah.
George.
Whenever I walk through the hardware store these days and see an X, I think of Kjetil. Yeah, it's gone bad.
It's sad that that's my reputation, but still.
I showed how to Morse mod a G90 with an axe on the club meeting this week. I showed your video, so you're getting famous out there, Kjetil.
That's nice.
If you run out of firewood, I also might have a Vasu that you can put on the fire.
Great, looking forward to that.
It's a radio, right?
It's a radio. Yeah.
George, welcome back to the show. It's probably been about a year since you guys from Ham Radio Workbench was on the show, and then we returned the favor and guested your show, which was a really nice experience. It was kind of weird to listen to my favorite podcast and at the same time be on it. That was kind of an outside myself experience.
and see what people actually look like and think like, boy, you look a lot shorter on video.
Exactly. But it was a great experience. And I have to say, though, I had an ear infection then, and I could only hear on one ear, and I had a fever, and I had a couple of "did I really say that" moments when I listened to the podcast.
We have those all the time.
Yeah. But thanks again for being on. Let me see if I can get Bob back on here. And what's your ham radio moment of the week, George?
I'm working on a whole bunch of circuit boards. So I'm right in the midst of making the first run of pre-production like prototype boards for my station controller system. So the station controller's got a bunch of different modules that you can put together. And so I did some preliminary tests that worked out well. And so now I'm kind of right in the middle of designing 4 main circuit boards, different modules for that system. So I'm deeply buried in KiCad and part selection and placing and routing the circuit boards right now.
That sounds exciting, and we're going to have you on sometime this winter to talk a little bit about the station controller. So that's going to be interesting to actually have a deep dive into that. And if you have to do an elevator pitch on what the station controller is for the people that don't listen to the world's best ham radio podcast, could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. So the original idea for the station controller was to either do remotely controlled radio station or just to automate your station conveniently at home. There's a bunch of things you'd like to be able to remotely control. The radio itself, control of that is kind of a solved problem, regardless of the brand you have. There's either software products that the vendor makes or somebody else makes. But what's not a solved problem is everything that sits around the radio. So how do you turn the power on and off? How do you switch antennas? How do you measure the battery voltage, et cetera? And some of those things are also solved problems, but they're individual little gadgets that do that thing. And I wanted to build an integrated system where you can have a single web interface or a keypad interface and be able to monitor and control all that stuff, whether you're sitting in front of it or it's on the other side of the planet.
Awesome. And for someone that's diving into the realm of remote ham radio, this seems like a really good concept.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem that people have solved by patching 10 things together, and that's fine if you like doing that, but I wanted something that's more off the shelf. And with some features I haven't seen really before. So anyway, we'll talk about it in more detail on another show. But the architecture's done, the circuitry design is pretty much done, and now it's in board layout mode. And I'm starting to get the first couple of boards back from the assembly house.
Awesome. Looking forward to hearing more about that. Bob, you have an Echo Alpha 6 in front of your call sign, so I guess we pretty much have an idea of what your ham radio moment of the week is, but go ahead and tell us.
Yeah, you might. I just have a question for George first, because I'm really looking forward to learning more about this station controller thing. But this is probably not for this episode. But you said you have different modules that connect to this. How do these modules communicate? Is that just by GPIO, or is there I2C, or how do the modules communicate in this system?
Oh, that's a great question. That's an hour. But the short answer is every module, whether it's a host like a Raspberry Pi that's serving the web page, or a general purpose PC, or not, or the module itself, everything has a UART, and the UART all talks to either an RS-485 channel or to a data radio. So I defined basically an ASCII text protocol for control. So it's all text in the clear, so you can write your own software or add your own devices if you like. So the protocol is published. So the physical interface between, let's say, the web server and a module, if it's in the same location, is a Cat5 cable. And on the Cat5, I run power, so you can run like PoE, but it's 12 volts. And then there's 2 pins that are used for the A and B signals for RS-485. And the reason for RS-485 is that it talks right to a simple interface chip to a UART, and you can multi-drop as many devices on that network as you like without the complexity of Ethernet. So that's sort of the physical way. So like if you want to put a module 50 feet away, you can run a piece of Cat5 cable and deliver power as well as data to it. The alternative to that is to use a data radio. So you take the same UART signal and you run it into a little data radio. And I've used several different ones, so it's independent of the radio. You can use whatever radio module you want. What I'm using is either XB data radios that are these little postage stamp size radios that typically use like a Zigbee protocol for the transport, but my protocol sits on top of that. Or you can use the latest version also uses Heltec Meshtastic radios. So the reason for that is that you can get more link budget with LoRa than you can with the normal 802.15.4 kind of industrial control module. So what's really cool about that is like where I'm here, I have a module half a mile away that I could see and talk to over the LoRa data link, and that's with trees and stuff in the way. So anyway, that's kind of a cool thing too, because with your phone, if you can take your phone, Bluetooth it to a Meshtastic device, and you could either interrogate or control a device from your phone through the Meshtastic channel, which, by the way, it kind of dawned on me the other day. I could go into speech to text mode, so I can say relay 1 on. It'll send that text. The remote device will decode it, and it'll flip the relay. So anyway, it's a long answer to your question. But the answer is there's many ways to actually connect them together.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a fantastic answer. And as I remember, the 485 RS485. It's a nice protocol for things like this, and it's also differential signaling, so that it's fairly immune to radio interference, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. The big advantage of 485, it's been around for 40 years. It's used in industrial automation control. You can run the wire pair. It could be just twisted pair. It doesn't have to be anything special. You can run it thousands of feet, and you can drop multiple devices on it. And every device has its own unique address that's set on the device. And so you can have N devices sharing that common multi-drop cable. So it's really simple, really cheap. And you can also build your own. If you said, okay, that's great, I want to build my own gadget, then I publish the protocol and the physical interface spec, so you can build your own thing too. So it's kind of DIY also.
That's really looking forward to hearing more about this now. So yeah,
Great.
that's I'll be quick, since I took up a lot of time with something that really wasn't on topic today. But that's what we do on the European Ham Radio Show. My ham radio moment of the week was surviving my first summit on Mallorca. I was tricked by a mountain to climb to the summit. I was tricked in the way that it just got steeper and steeper and steeper and more difficult. And I think for the last hour I was crawling up it on all fours. But the thing with these mountains that just get steeper and steeper is that all the time you just think, oh, I've made it this far, I'm not going to give up now. And it just keeps getting steeper, and you think, I made it this far, it can't get any worse than this, but it can. Yeah, that's my ham radio moment. I think this is the first time on a summit I've been I wouldn't say scared, but I was worried about that thing. So I was checking my phone, and as soon as I was in the activation zone, I just put the antenna up and activated. Other than that, I've activated quite a few more summits down here so far, a total of 5. And Mallorca it's beautiful. The Spaniards are really, really nice people. The weather is really nice. I even enjoy this dumbass car that I got here, which is it's a hybrid. It's got everything wrong with it, but for some reason I actually enjoy driving it. So I must be in a particularly good mood this week.
What radio did you?
After all, was it?
What radio did you take with you?
I took only 2 actually. I took the 705 and the FX4CR. So I'm pretty pleased with the fact that I managed to pack only 2 radios.
Do you have a favorite between the 2?
Yeah, the 705. It's impossible to beat. But I think the FX4CR, just the size of it and the capabilities that I put into that tiny little box, I just love it for that. So as a backup radio, or as a radio, just for when it's convenient, yeah, I love it. But it's no 705, sadly. So yeah. But Yaesu now has announced that they're making their own 705, so I'm looking forward to receiving that radio. I got on a waiting list for Mark Lynch and some, so let's see if I get one of the early versions this time. Really looking forward to seeing if that is as nice as I hope.
And it's probably going to be really nice. At least I hope. But sounds great to be down there and do soda in Spain. Fantastic. I'm kind of envious that you do all these kind of travels for playing radio, and you actually find time for it. So someday, hopefully, I will too. Tobias.
The thing is that you don't find time, you take time, and I understand that that's not for everyone always, but this time has been taken, it's not been found. So
that is probably a good way of doing it, though.
Yeah.
Tobias, you have been waiting for coax this week, haven't you?
Yeah, right. I had the typical UPS. Where's my package? It gets delivered. It doesn't get delivered. It gets delayed, and now it's somehow lost in the warehouse experience. On the other hand, I had vacation this week, and the weather really cleared up. So Monday was still pouring down like hell, but the last 5 days was fine. So I got a lot of garden work in, and yeah, today I then gave up waiting for the coax and just put the Diamond X5000 onto my mast on the roof with the worst coax cable possible because the other one didn't show up. But the sunny season is ending. I think the next few days it will be rain, so I thought, okay, let's put it on the roof. And I can at least see if there are still repeaters around this area because I haven't been on 2 meter, 70 centimeter for a few years now. And yeah, just to see what's going on in the vicinity, basically.
But any coax is better than no coax, right?
Yeah, and any antenna is better than no antenna. Yeah, but ideally I would have only done climbing onto the roof and being really careful, and I would have done it preferably only once, but now I have to do it twice.
Yeah, but you're still up and running. I mean, I have a ladder up to my roof.
Yeah,
I have ladder going up to my roof that usually just stays there because there's always something that I got to do.
Here,
How are you still married? How is that possible?
got some security equipment here to not fall off the roof.
Oh, that is the most German thing I've seen today.
That's kind of common in Norwegian clubs. You have to have security stuff for insurance reasons. So
Yeah, but I don't use it at home though. I probably should have, but
this is a 45-degree angle, yeah, and okay,
yeah, that is pretty steep though. So.
I have the steps for the chimney sweep, which is convenient because I can walk on these steps and get to the mast and so on. But still, you don't want to slip and fall off a 10-meter high 45-degree roof. You don't want to do that.
No, exactly. You absolutely don't want to do that. I had a question, but I forgot it, so we'll get back to that at some other point. So let's go ahead and see what my ham radio moment of the week has been. And there hasn't really been a lot of ham radio this week, but I managed, and let's see if we can press the right button here. I managed to get a Ham Shack hotline phone up again because I've been trying to get rid of this for, I think, the 4 last Hamfests I've been to. It turns out that selling a Cisco IP phone it's not an easy sale. So I figured, why not put it up in the shack? So I 3D printed a wall mount for it and put it up yesterday. And then it turned out that Ham Shack Hotline have changed their phone numbers and made them shorter. So I needed to reprovision the phone, which was pretty easy. But before I did that, Ham Shack Hotline banned my IP since I tried to connect using a 10-digit phone number instead of a 7-digit phone number. So it took a little bit of work to get it back on, but it's up and running now. But that's not the ham radio moment.
Have immediate calls into the show.
We can.
Right?
If you're on Ham Shack Hotline, and let's see, we'll do a dedicated episode if you want to call in, so the phone doesn't ring in the middle of this show. Not that there's a lot of chance of it doing that, but that's not the ham.
I have a Ham Shack Hotline question. Is that just an ordinary SIP account? There's nothing magic about it, or is there something special making it ham?
It is an ordinary SIP account, but it's a ham run service. So you need to register with Ham Shack Hotline, and then you get if you have a Cisco phone, you just get a link that you pretty much put in your internal network IP, and it just configures the phone for you.
But I could just use a soft phone on my phone so that it would actually be radio bound.
You could, but there's something in the terms of use with Ham Shack Hotline, so you cannot get the soft phone account without having a hardwired phone first.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I may have one or two of those as well. But continue
Yeah.
your
So-
moment.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But that's not my ham radio moment of the week though, because I think 2 weeks ago I talked about having my first QSO with Japan on sideband, but not with my own call sign, since it was field day and I used a club call sign. Yesterday morning, I finally managed to get Japan on 15-meter sideband with my own call sign. So
Hey.
I now have Japan on 15 meters sideband, and that was a good feeling. So that's my ham radio moment of the week, and that's pretty much the entire amount of ham radio I've been doing this week.
If you're
What a
only going to
pretty
do
good
one
moment.
QSO, then doing Japan is pretty all right in my book.
Yeah, I usually do that. I get one of those exotic DXs, and then I figured I've played enough ham radio for today. But on to our topic. George, you know a little bit about repeaters, and that's why we asked you to be on here and talk a little bit about the subject. But first of all, what is a repeater? If you should explain what a repeater is in layman's terms. Let's start out there, and we'll dive much deeper into the subject probably within the next 45 minutes or so.
Sure. Well, I mean, the very simple definition of the repeater is basically it receives a signal on one frequency and retransmits it on another frequency to expand the coverage area on VHF, UHF, and above, because the range from radio to radio line of sight is limited, and if you can get one of the ends of the contact up at a high location, that retransmission of the signal gives you much wider physical coverage.
That's a simple way of explaining a repeater, but
that is about as simple as it gets.
Yeah, it is as simple as it gets. And if there are any new hams here, that's the simple way, and there's no magic involved in it. And what are actually the
yes
parts?
And no.
So what are the parts necessary to set up a repeater, basically?
So a repeater system, a basic repeater has 4 or 5 basic components. There's the antenna system, which is the antenna feed line, and a duplexer, which allows you to transmit and receive simultaneously on the antenna, typically. A receiver and a transmitter, and a power supply, and a control system that connects everything together and orchestrates the actual repeater operation.
Yeah, that's pretty simple. But if you were gonna make a repeater yourself, how would you go about to do that? And and what are the solutions there?
Well, first of all, in my mind, this is one of those topics where you can either do something very professionally or you can do something kind of quick and dirty. So it kind of depends on your goal. And I've talked to a lot of people over the years who are building repeaters, and the first thing I always ask them is, what's your goal? So what do I mean by that? For some, for example, for a club, the goal could be that we want a repeater that has excellent performance, that has really great coverage, that's robust, and in an emergency, it's available 24/7, and it's a resource that people are going to bank on. That's kind of like one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is the ham who says, you know, I don't really have a great location. I just want to slap something together. I'm going to put it in my house, and I'm just doing it for the fun of it. And maybe if I can get a few blocks, that's all I really care about. And if it's off the air for a week, nobody's going to notice. So there's really kind of two ends of the spectrum, and a lot of people are really somewhere in between. So when you get into what kind of equipment should I use, this question kind of dictates some of your decisions. So, like for example, if you want a very robust system, you have to think about things like backup power. Whereas if it's a casual system that you don't care if it goes offline, if the power goes out, well, that's a very different approach, right? So same thing goes for the quality of the radios or the quality of the filters or the antenna or anything else in the system. So the first thing is like, okay, how fancy in terms of robustness do you want your system to be? And then you can kind of go from there. So for example, there's a lot of commercial equipment that's on the market, used equipment or new for that matter, but there's a lot of good used equipment you can get. Like I said, the power system could be fancy or simplistic. The quality of your coax even kind of depends on how sophisticated of a system you want to put up. How much, do you want to really squeeze all the performance out of it you can, or just get something up on the air? maybe you're constrained by budget, and so maybe you'd love to have a big fancy repeater system, but at the end of the day, you're just scraping together what you can to make something work, and that's fine too. So the decisions about what you get and how you set it up really depends on like your budget and how serious you are about building a robust system. Like almost anything, really.
Yeah, budget is always an important question to ask when hams ask about something. But if you, let's say, the middle route though, what is the best approach? Is it building your own system with a repeater controller, or is it buying something readily made like the Yaesus that Yaesu is almost giving away now? I can't remember what they're called though.
Yeah, that's the DR2X is the,
Yeah.
I think is the latest version. So it really sort of depends. It kind of gets back to your group or yourself, you know, and like budget and time and technical ability, frankly. So for instance, you can buy all the things you want and screw it together and install it and have a functional repeater, or you can build something. And like a lot of things, if you build it yourself, you can get either more features or more quality for the same price, as opposed to going to buy something. So buying something off the shelf is not a bad route. So let's take the Yaesu as an example. Let's say you want to put up a repeater. Yaesu is I don't know what the deal is now. For a long time, when they were first rolling out System Fusion, they were promoting their repeaters at super low prices to get people to buy them, and I think that was a smart decision for them from a sales perspective to try to get their gear rolled out. And they're decent. They're not great. They're not bad. They're kind of middle of the road. So what would be better than that would be a commercial repeater. You know, commercial repeaters made by companies like Motorola and other professional two-way radio companies make more robust gear. So it's better than something like a Yaesu repeater. But here it depends too on not just how robust you want it, but the RF environment it's going into. So if you're going to put a repeater at a radio site that's got a lot of other equipment, two-way equipment or broadcast equipment, then there's going to be a lot more potential interference, either you getting interference or you causing interference. And so when you go with a less expensive kind of equipment, there's more chances of having interference problems. Whereas the commercial gear tends to be better filtered, and so maybe you'd be better off going that route. But if you're putting it, let's say, you know, at someone's home on the top of a hill and there's no RF really to speak of, that doesn't really matter a whole lot. Then it's just a matter of what's going to be more reliable. So like a commercial repeater, let's say you buy a Motorola repeater or, you know, something from another commercial two-way business, you can get repeater quality equipment that has a high duty cycle, which is intended to transmit most, if not all the time, or you can buy low duty cycle equipment, and all the ham stuff is kind of low duty cycle, which means it works perfectly fine as long as it's not on 24 hours a day. and it, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and the Yaesu question was partly a leading question. My club bought one of those Yaesu repeaters a couple of years ago because the deal was just so good on them.
Yeah.
I think we paid approximately, if we converted to US dollars, about $900 for it. And that is a really good deal. What we have figured out though is we have to turn the power down. The PA section does not like it being run on 50 watts all the time. But besides
are you allowed to run 50 watts on a repeater in Norway? I thought it was a 25 watt cap.
I think you're allowed to run 50 watts. There are repeaters that run a lot more than 50 watts as well.
Oh, all right.
I
might be wrong. Yeah.
I don't. Again, this is not legal advice. I do not know, but
just for my curiosity, that $900 US dollar, was that including the filter?
No, it was excluding the duplexer.
All right, so basically just two radios and a controller. That was
it's basically two radios and a controller, and it's got Well, it's got a user interface designed by Yaesu, so it took us about 2 weeks to get it on the air.
No, so I used to have a Yaesu repeat. I've had a bunch of different repeaters and used to have a Yaesu one. So it's not a bad decision, because you get it off the shelf, you can front panel program it, it works, that's all fine and dandy. There's some limitations to them in terms of their performance. They're okay, not fantastic. They also are not as easy to interface to external controllers. So if you want something self-contained that is just a single frequency pair repeater, it's not a bad way to go. But if you want to interface it to a multi-port controller because you have links or voice over IP connections or multiple repeaters, then they don't make it very easy to do that well. There is a way to do it, but it's not super easy. So anyway, there's trade-offs. So I think for the price, it's not a bad way to go. If you're going to build your own, you can go buy a couple of used mobile radios and make a repeater. Now, I don't recommend doing that with ham radios. I would only do that with commercial two-way radios, and even then, you have to baby them a bit. But they'd be equal or better quality at less of a cost. But somebody has to program them, and somebody has to wire them up, and so there's some work involved. And a lot of times, a lot of clubs are like, we just want to buy it. Get it and turn it on.
That was our decision, because our old repeater didn't work properly anymore, and we just wanted something that we could just put in the rack, turn it on, and hopefully get it up. But it's not that logical that you have to press the squelch button in order for it to transmit. But that's a topic for a whole nother show.
Something that's really common here in Norway is by getting old used equipment and putting that on the air. Is that like common over there in the States as well? Or
yeah.
So
I would say every groups do everything, right? They'll get old terrible equipment, they'll get old good equipment, they'll buy new, they'll buy ham stuff, so they'll do everything. It just depends on the group. My personal approach to this is I buy used commercial equipment and go that route, because you wind up with a professional commercial quality piece of equipment at the end of the day. And usually there's a little bit of work, there's wiring you have to do, and you have to have the programming software and all that. But once you kind of figure that out, then the rest is pretty straightforward. And you do get, for the price, you get a very good piece of equipment.
Yeah, that's nice. I guess also you mentioned, like, if you rig up in a commercial location, or maybe a radio tower up on a hill or something like that, I would guess there's also quite a lot of requirements from the landowners, or like the guys that run this facility, that you're not disturbing and interfering with others.
Yeah, it depends on where you go. So here in the States, there's so many sites. And if it's a fairly low RF site, the landlord might not care. But any place that's a real commercial two-way site with any serious operation, there's usually a lot of strict guidelines around what kind of equipment you can put in there, or what kind of filtering you need. So this is where you kind of start getting into optional stuff to harden the system. So the first thing is you want a very good quality duplexer, because you want to keep your energy out of the other neighbor's radio, and you want to keep their energy out of your radio. So the better the duplexer, the better you are. So for a repeater, you want a pass notch kind of duplexer, meaning you want to band pass the frequency of choice, and you want to reject the other frequency in your own system. So that's kind of a minimum. But beyond that, the commercial radios, for example, something you don't see in ham equipment is a lot of commercial repeaters have something called a circulator. And a circulator is a ferrite device that sits in the transmit line that keeps RF energy that's coming from another source coming back down your feed line, getting into your transmitter and mixing and creating spurs. And so that's something you'll never find on a piece of amateur equipment. But if you go buy a Motorola, official 100% duty cycle real live repeater, they'll have a circulator built into it. It's just part of the equipment, because they go into these kind of hardened commercial sites. So that's like an example of why some of the commercial equipment is actually better.
Just the circulator wasn't immediately apparent to me. Is that a passive device or an active device?
Yeah. No, it's a passive device. Circulator is a 3-port device. It's usually like a little box, depends on the power level. A little box. It's got 3 coax connectors. The transmitter goes into one port. the antenna goes into the second port, and a dummy load goes into the third port. And well, what does that do? Essentially, it's a ferromagnetic. Oh, it's almost like a diode. Think of it as like a ring diode, where the RF from your transmitter goes in one port and comes out to the antenna. Any energy that comes back down the feed line from the antenna goes to the dummy load and is shunted. So it never gets to your transmitter electronics. And what it's really used for is if you have your transmitter and your neighbor's transmitter are at the same location, physically close to each other, they're transmitting a lot of power, that energy is going to come over and try to get down into your transmitter. The problem is that when even a small amount of their RF energy comes down into your transmitter, it'll mix with the various frequencies in the chain in your transmitter, create sums and product terms of frequencies, and retransmit that as spurious emissions. So the circulator prevents that RF from coming back by shunting it off to the dummy load.
But is that only common mode or differential mode as well that will be rejected?
It's the actual RF carrier. So don't think of it as like power, like a energy on the feed line, like power. It's going to be an RF carrier that's being transmitted, getting back in there.
All right.
So so that's, you can actually go, like in the surplus market, you can go find like circulators that were pulled out of service from a radio, and you could install one in your own ham radio repeater. So that's kind of a little workaround to improve the performance.
But this is a tunable device then, because you usually have one antenna, so you want your receive to pass through, but not everyone else's.
Yeah, well, they're fairly broadband actually. They are tunable. There's usually a little screw adjustment to tweak them. But you'd get like a UHF band circulator that has maybe, I don't know, 20 megahertz bandwidth, and you would tune the peak. But it's not like a notch duplexer where it's a very high Q. It's relatively broader than that. But they're still tunable, and they're band specific.
Oh, very cool.
So anyway, then there's all kinds of other things you can do to harden a repeater in terms of how you filter the power that's going into it, or the cables between the equipment and all that sort of stuff too. But one of the biggest problems is that, especially at a high commercial site with a lot of two-way equipment, there's tons of transmitters and receivers, and the first order problem is how do you just keep them from like interfering with each other, like blocking the front end or that sort of thing. That's why you need really good duplexers. So like in the repeater system that I built in the Bay Area, every one of the UHF repeaters had a 6-cavity duplexer, pass notch duplexer. And the main one, we also had an additional 2-cavity preselector in there because we had a gas FET preamp. So we tried to improve the performance of the receiver, but we have to throw more filters on it to make it really narrow and really high performance because there's other transmitters in the area.
And I guess that's common though, because most people want their repeaters up on a site which has great coverage, and so does the commercial users of RF. So I mean, if you want at the ideal location, you're usually competing against radio stations and TV stations and cell phone networks and commercial radio services. So in that case, you have to really think out your plan. Whereas if you have it at your club shack and there's not much RF besides the RF you make yourself in the shack, you have a much more controllable environment, and you have an easier access to the site when things don't work. Because at a lot of those commercial sites, it's not really that straightforward to go and troubleshoot something if it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And by the way, a really good example of different equipment at those two different types of sites is the duplexer, because you can get a duplexer like a mobile duplexer. It doesn't have any pass cavities. It's strictly what's called a notch duplexer. So on one side of the duplexer, you try to notch out the receiver frequency, and on the other side, you try to notch out the transmit frequency. All you're doing is keeping your transmitter out of your receiver. It does nothing for anybody else. So there's no way to reduce the RF energy going to somebody else. But if there's nobody there, it doesn't matter. So when you're in a vehicle, it doesn't matter. When you're at the club station and there's no other two-way radio repeaters or anything else like that, doesn't matter. But as soon as you go to a site where there's like, 5 other repeaters and they're all in the same UHF band, plus or minus 20, 30 megahertz, then it becomes a problem. And that's really when you need to have a better quality duplexer that has multiple cavities, and there are also pass cavities in addition to the notch cavities. That gives you better selectivity to keep not only you out of yourself, but your neighbor out of you and you out of your neighbor as well.
And I see that we probably don't have enough time on this show to go as deep as we would like. But I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit here, George, because a lot of repeater systems are linked. And what are the usual ways of linking a repeater system?
Well, it depends on when you were born. So if you've been at this a long time, the linking was traditionally done by RF before there was that internet thing. So you would use radios to link the repeaters together. There's different approaches to that. There's some approaches where you would have a central site and satellite sites, and you could either have just voting receivers or you can have full-on repeaters remotely, and you would link to the main site on a different band often. So you might have a 2-meter repeater or a set of 2-meter repeaters, and then use UHF as the link between the remote sites and the central site. The group that I am part of, I have been part of since the late 70s, started out, the main purpose of it was to build a big linked repeater network, and we now have the largest RF connected link network that exists. It's over 200 plus repeaters, and 90% of them are connected by RF. And the way we do that is the repeaters are on UHF. And here we're really lucky in the US because we have a much larger UHF band. We have 420 to 450 megahertz. So we have 30 megahertz of spectrum to play with just in UHF. And so we run the repeater on the high end in the 440 to 450 part of the band. And then we run our links down at the low end at the 420 to 430 end of the band. And I know you can't do that in a lot of other countries, so that's not an option. But you could move the linking to let's say 1.2 gigs or 900 megahertz, maybe 800 megahertz elsewhere. But you could use other bands. So RF linking was kind of the traditional way that it was done. With the advent of the internet, there's a whole nother approach now, of course, which you have to have, of course, an internet connection at your radio site, but then you can run voice over IP, or what's called in the commercial world radio over IP, which is voice over IP plus push to talk. It's the extra information that's sent. So you can now have multiple repeater sites if they have an internet connection, and you can hub over the internet. And there's obvious trade-offs. I mean, when you do a radio to radio backbone, it's a lot of hardware, because every link, if you do it properly, like the way we build it, every link is a full duplex link. It's the same hardware you have on the repeater itself. So you need a duplexer and feed line and antenna and all that stuff, another pair of radios. So for every link, it's like having another repeater. So that gets very equipment heavy. So it's expensive and there's a lot to maintain. The internet is much easier to deal with just a little computer and do radio over IP. The downside is when the internet goes out, then you're off the air, or at least the linking's off the air. So that's an obvious downside. So it depends on the mission that you're trying to execute. The other thing, and this is kind of the more recent approach, is to use your own private RF digital backbone data network. So with a whole lot of long haul Wi-Fi equipment out there, you can start linking using IP between sites if you can run an IP link between the sites. So just to give you some example, like when we're doing point-to-point RF linking at 420 megahertz, we can get up to about 150-mile distance between sites. Now, of course, it depends on the elevation of the sites, right? So they can't be on the ground; they have to be up on mountains. But about the longest haul we've done is about 150 miles. When you're running it, let's say a 5 gig point-to-point link, that's a really long haul. So you're not talking about usually 150 miles. You're talking maybe 10, 20, 30 miles, maybe a little bit better. But you can get a lot of very inexpensive equipment from companies like Ubiquiti and run pretty good bandwidth between sites using that kind of gear. So now what you wind up doing is it's kind of like radio over IP, but you're bringing your own IP network. You're not relying on the public internet. You're building your own private data network, which I think is a really cool alternative, because not only can you build that link, but you can also run other services over that IP link. You can run, VoIP phones or cameras or, whatever you want on your own private data network. So that's a kind of a third way that's being done more and more.
And that is it brings the best of two worlds, as far as I can hear here. To it,
Yeah.
it brings the IP bit, but it brings the robustness of not having it on the internet. And I see that Dave over at Irish Ham Radios, they use All-Star Link to link their repeaters, and my impression is that is becoming more and more common.
Yeah, that's super common. That's just one of the examples of a radio over IP implementation. So you can do, you can use one of these kind of standard radio over IP systems like All-Star, All-Star Echolink, IRLP, et cetera. You can do your own private point-to-point. You put up your own server. You can run your own All-Star server or a Mumble server or some, whatever VoIP server that you want, and do your own version of that as well. All-Star is actually really cool. I use All-Star a fair bit myself.
And All-Star, it brings the opportunity for people that aren't, or an Echolink, of course, too. I got a little bit distracted by the cat here, but all those systems brings an ability for people that are not in the vicinity of the repeaters to actually join the network, and that is absolutely great. And since it's analog, you don't need to mess about with DMR, System Fusion, or D-Star, but that's a whole nother chapter of what we don't have enough time to discuss here.
Yes, that's a big rat hole.
That is a big rat hole, and should we address that a little bit? At least do it a little bit on the scratch the surface of the topic, and perhaps we can go into a little bit deeper in another episode.
Well, yeah, there's many ways we could take that. So like, what's the difference in terms of implementing a system?
Yeah,
Is that what you're
absolutely.
thinking?
Yeah, I'm thinking both from a user perspective and most of all from a repeater administrator perspective. It's a lot more work, at least with DMR, which is kind of, at least in the ham world, dependent on an internet connection. And I think D-Star as well. I don't have a lot of experience with D-Star. What are the advantages of doing, let's say, DMR on a repeater to doing analog FM?
Well, so we'll take a little step back for a second. So if you compare a conventional FM repeater system to a digital one, regardless of which one, if you're putting up a standalone repeater that's not connected to anything else, there's really no difference, except that one happens to be digital and the other one happens to be analog. In other words, one of the things that you hear sometimes that's really kind of an odd, erroneous comment is I don't want to use a digital repeater because I don't want to be tied to the internet. Well, you're only tied to the internet if you want a gateway to something else. So if you just want to talk, in your local area that has coverage of your local repeater, just like your FM repeater, it's the same thing. It's just you're just in a digital radio. So it would work just fine without any internet. You don't need the internet to use any of the digital radio repeaters at all. However, if you want to take advantage of the ability to gateway to link to something else, the linking method is IP. So then the question is, well, how do you haul the IP somewhere? So now it's the same exact thing as All-Star or any other voice over IP kind of linking. You have to have an internet connection somewhere. So that either means you have to have that at the repeater site, which would be convenient, or you have to backhaul it to some place on the ground and then get into the internet. So it's the same whether you're running a radio over IP, FM kind of thing like All-Star, or DMR or D-Star or Fusion. I mean, that's all the same. It's all backhauling your signal over IP to something else. By the way, from the administrator's perspective, I've set up DMR, D-Star, and Fusion repeaters. I'm most familiar with DMR, a little bit less the others. But setting up a DMR repeater as an administrator is really easy. So the first DMR repeater I installed was a Motorola, what is it, SLR 5500 or 5700? I forget which the model is. But it took me like 15 minutes to configure it, and it was on the air. I mean, there's like nothing to it. So it's not difficult to set up. The ICOM's D-Star repeater was more of a pain because you had to have a PC. So the Motorola DMR repeater, you don't have to have a PC. Everything's built in. You have an Ethernet jack on the back that goes to your router, and off you go. With the D-Star, you have a PC. You run the D-Star software on the PC, and then you have to configure it. So that's a little bit more of a pain. And I'm not an expert on Fusion. I've administered a system, and someone else was the expert, so I don't want to speak out of turn. But I think it was similar to the D-Star thing with a PC.
It is. I've actually been looking into this a little bit since we have that AC repeater, and running it digitally locally is no problem. That's just pushing a button which has a text, since it's the AC, that does not correspond what you really wanted to do. But if you want to link it up with Wires X, I think it's called, that requires a PC. It requires a Windows PC, and it requires a modem, and things get a lot more complicated. So we've actually chosen not to do that at our repeater. We've actually turned off the System Fusion functionality all the way, because if people don't have a receive tone on their handset, they get the digital noise, and it got to a point of a lot of confusion for, let's say, the older hams. So we opted out of doing any digital there.
So it's funny you should mention that, because the ACU is touting how many Fusion repeaters are out there, and you can go to a place like Repeater Book and get statistics for how many DMR repeaters are there, how many D-Star, how many Fusion in a given geography. And the number of Fusion repeaters is way up there, pretty close to the number of DMR repeaters. But when you talk to a lot of the people who run the Fusion repeaters, they're doing what you're doing, which is like, we got a great deal on the repeater and we just use it like a legacy FM repeater. Yeah. We actually don't use it. I'm not saying that's universally true, because there's a lot of digital Fusion stuff out there too, but a lot of them aren't. So it's kind of funny that, they wind up being good replacements for old analog repeaters.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we got it, though. We had actually no interest of going digital, but we looked into it since we bought a repeater that had that option. But by the time you buy that modem and you set up a computer, you're actually down quite a lot of money for something that probably not a lot of people are going to use. And well, that's true for any repeater, though, at least here in Norway. A lot of repeaters here don't get a lot of use, which I think is a shame, since almost everyone has a 2-meter radio. But when you add digital to it, you kind of make that space or that user base even smaller for your repeater.
Yeah.
And I think that the ultimate goal should be to have as large as possible user base and actually get to use your equipment.
So this is a real issue. I mean, we had my old club. We ran multiple FM repeaters, and we hooked them all together. So we had 2-meter UHF and 900 megahertz repeaters all connected together. You go into one, you come out all three. We added another site. We RF linked to the other site. So we expanded the footprint, et cetera. And then the first digital repeater we installed about 10 years ago, we put a D-Star repeater in. And that kind of carved out some of the users. Now, some users stayed on FM and some went to D-Star. Then we added a Fusion repeater that carved off another group. Then we added a DMR repeater. So like we were in the Balkan states of digital radio, and it was really a shame, because we had a very cohesive crowd on the FM repeater. And after a couple of years, we had 4 smaller crowds that didn't talk to each other. And it was like, wait a minute, this is a problem. So we were having a bunch of serious conversations about, like, should we shut one of these things off? Or there's other solutions where you can hub multiple digital dissimilar networks in the cloud and reconnect them together. So there's a piece of software called DV Switch. There's some other stuff out there that'll do a similar thing. So that might be the solution, because we have this balkanized version of ham radio with all these different subgroups, which is a shame when you really want the opposite effect.
Exactly. And now M17 is coming, which is probably a great standard, but it's yet another digital mode for
well,
for ham
like
radio.
they say, that's the great thing about standards. There's so many.
Yep. And the thing is, though, almost all of these radios have FM as well.
Right.
So, my opinion is that it's probably easier, and if you're going to do some linking, do it through All-Star Link or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's really are trade-offs. You can argue it all over the map. I mean, I've played with all of these. I tend to gravitate towards a few, not all of them, at the end of the day, because I don't have any interest in being like, it's like being in 4 different bands. I'll say one thing, that you kind of get used to the digital stuff after a while, and so it has some nice novelty factor. When you come back to FM, it's kind of like, oh man, that sounds so much better. So I hate to say it, but it's like the fidelity.
It does.
Is so much better.
And even through an IP network such as All-Star Link, it sounds so much better.
Well, the headroom in the like a 64 kilobit codec that's typical with All-Star, you can pick your codec, but that's the most common one. It has way more headroom than you're going to get on a 2-meter FM radio anyway. So you have excellent fidelity.
Exactly. So and I see that Dave's got a comment here that the best place for DMR is with personal gateways, and that is my use for DMR. I sometimes have my hotspot up and running for a week or two until I get bored and use the Raspberry Pi for something else. But for that use, it's great. And I got a portable hotspot that I sometimes bring when traveling, if there aren't any repeaters nearby, or I don't want to mess with HF. But that's usually what I use DMR for. And
we have a full-on DMR repeater at home, which is like, it's amazing. And there's actually some traffic on it, but that's mostly people chatting locally on channel or talk group 9. So they could just use anything else. But so that is kind of fun. But I've had a Yaesu radio now for 9 years. I've had one Fusion or a Virus X QSO on it. One single QSO where that worked. Otherwise, I've never seen a repeater where it actually worked on. So that's kind of interesting. Like, as you say, it's not enabled everywhere.
So the weird thing about oh, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
I was just going to say, I did, I think that's probably close to 2 years ago now, right after I got my license. I got people to try out. We had every Thursday we had a net, but we tried different modes and different frequencies. And so we actually had a net on Fusion, not via a repeater, but just directly simplex net on Fusion and on DMR and on D-Star and the different things. And I got to say, I think at least Fusion is it's a very nice mode, and you don't even have to use a repeater to use that mode. And I think it's a little bit sad that you have a repeater that has that ability, but you turn it off just so that the people that can't be bothered to put a subtone in on receive won't be bothered with digital noise, because it is a nice mode for people to use when they actually have a capable equipment at both ends that can do, let's say, Fusion. I think that's it's a little bit sad that we end up.
I got to say though, the reason is a little bit more complicated than that, and that's because we have about I think 3 Fusion radios in the club. So there is no use of complicating stuff more than needed. But that being said, we have tried it on a couple of times with Fusion, and it sounds better. The range is better, but we've made some trade-offs, and I want, as a repeater manager, I want to keep it as simple as possible and just let the repeater sit in the corner of the club shack and do its thing. And the less I have to fiddle with it, the better it is. And I'm just looking at the time here. I wish we had more time for this topic because we could have gone so much deeper. But Kjetil, you have something to show off here just quickly. And before you do that, thank you, George, for letting us do a little bit of a deep dive into a topic that is way deeper than I thought when I planned the subject.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you guys very much for having me. And if you want to do a 3-hour episode on this, let me know.
We do. We need to continue this. This is it's the rabbit hole that is much deeper than I figured. So we need to book you for at least another show, maybe more, and the other the station controller thing as well.
Yeah, we already have
forward to hearing about that.
We already have George booked for 2 more shows, so we'll see if we can book him for a third one at some point.
Yeah, and then we can.
Thanks.
And then maybe we can extend the time a bit as well. So we actually plan to be more than an hour.
We should probably do that with subjects like this. Kjetil, we're going to talk about WinLink next week, and you have some information for our viewers.
Yes, we would love to have check-ins for WinLink. And for those who have used WinLink, most of you have sent an email. But there's also a way to actually send a check-in message and actually prepare it. So I'm going to do a really quick little demo here at the end of the stream. And we're also going to put that up as a separate video so that you can see it. But the point here is that we would like to know where you're checking in from. And let's see if I can share my screen.
I think we need to begin.
Yeah, I'm sharing it now, Martin.
Yeah. You're sharing now. I'm going to put it up here.
Yes, and now you hopefully see WinLink and not yourself.
Yep, we see WinLink.
Excellent. So when you go in here and you click new message or over here and do a new message, then you get this normal, boring, empty window. Up on the top here, there's something called templates, which you click that one, go in here and expand the, I think it's the standard templates. You find the mapping GIS forms or global information systems. And then down here, we have something called a WinLink check-in.txt. And that pops up a new tab in the browser. And in here, you can fill in a lot of information. So click on setup first and just type in, for example, TEHRS check-in. And the date is auto-populated to should be Lima Bravo 4 Foxtrot Hotel -5. So it's a -5 on the end. And you also send from, which should be your call sign. And that also auto-populates. You need to fill in your contact name, which is usually your first name, and also your call sign. And this is mostly for example, multi-station operations where you use a club call sign and you want to send a message on behalf of somebody else, for example. Down here, we have something called session. This is an exercise and not a real event. So, for example, in case of a flood or an earthquake or so on, you would use real event. Service here is amateur, and the band for me is going to be telnet because I'm going to be cheating here. Also, session is telnet, but it could also be, for example, Vara HF. And then tiny bit of a description about where you are, for example, at home. And then you fill in your grid. And when you do that, then that's going to auto-populate the rest of the fields here if I can manage to actually delete this, which I can't. Okay. Live demo effect outdoors. I can't actually write anything in this field. But you will be able to fill in this field here, and that's going to auto-populate the rest of latitude, longitude, and MGRS coordinates. Or you can actually put them in manually as well, and it will calculate the grid square, whichever way you prefer. And then it's going to be the comment, which in theory, if this was a real event, it could be a message, for example, from somebody you are communicating on behalf of, for example, the police or somebody else that needs help, or in this case, it's just going to be hello. And when you then just click submit here, it asks you to enter a message subject. Please don't change that one. Just click OK and OK once more. And when you then minimize this, you can see that it's filled in this form and it's attached some files. And you just post that to the outbox. And in my case, I'm going to send it with telnet, open session, and click start. And then it's going to send this message to myself. So this is a really quick walkthrough of the check-in. And next Sunday, we're going to have a much deeper dive into this setup, and I'm going to show you what happens with the message when I receive it, and a bit about how this can be used more practically.
And
So we are
hopefully
doing that
we'll
live. We have a lot of people checking in and sending you emails. So that's the plan?
Yes, that would be the plan. And remember to send to that LB4FH-5 address. And then you can send it in. You can send a normal message as well if you want to do that. And if you want to, use Telnet. If not, you can use HF, VHF, whatever mode you feel like. Just have fun and play with it. That's the point of next stream.
and
Yeah,
that's going to be it. Yeah, go ahead,
I'd encourage anyone that is able to use RF to send this message. That would be a lot more fun to see what bands, what modes we actually get messages over into the show. So if you're set up to do this over RF, please do next Sunday. That would be a lot more fun.
Yeah, or if you have, for example, something set up at your local repeater or a VHF, UHF gateway, something like that, please use that. Anything you can. Not USBS, as Jeff writes here, because that is not going to show up.
It will. It just takes about twice as long as China Post.
Okay, quick question. Does one of you guys have a video about WinLink setup on their channel? Maybe
I have several videos and on several different radios. So if you check my channel out and just search for WinLink there, you'll find it a setup for pretty much every radio I've had.
I think I may even be in one or two of those as well. I also have one which is about another check-in form, which is the USGS shakeout exercise. Not sure if you've heard about that, George.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes.
Which is basically a separate form, which is for recording earthquakes. So if you ever feel an earthquake, you can send a mail via WinLink on a specific form to the USGS, and they will then put that into their data and say that, oh, this person could see some buildings topple over or feel the ground shake or whatever. So it's kind of interesting.
I will definitely try to check in with as many modes as possible before next week's show. And I'll also try to edit this little video quickly and get it out on our channel. And hopefully a lot quicker than the podcasts have been out the last couple of weeks, because they've usually come in bulks of 2 and 3, because I have a tendency to forget come Monday morning. So I'm really sorry about that, and I'll try to do it better next week.
Yeah, and also if you have questions, we have a Discord. Please drop by there and ask questions if you need help, for example, setting up or a pointer to watch which videos to watch or whatever else. Then just send us a message on Discord, and we'll try to answer you.
Do we have a channel for this so we can get all these in the same channel, Kjetil?
That can be arranged.
We can fix that. And the link to the Discord is down in the description. It's hamshow.eu/Discord. Okay.
That sounds good, and sounds like a fun opportunity for everybody to do something different, maybe.
Yeah, to figure out WinLink. And I don't think I have instructions on your radio, though, Tobias. I do have.
I figured it out a while ago. I sent myself an email successfully to my private email address, so in theory it should work.
Yeah, I do have a video for the 705 though, even though I don't have that radio in my possession anymore.
I mean, as with any digital mode, you only have to watch your ALC and make sure you're not distorting. Yeah, so tweak your TX volume accordingly, and then you're fine. So it's not.
Yep. And WinLink is at least VARA is really, really robust. So it takes a lot for it not to work.
But I can say also that the 705, if you want to do VARA FM or packet, then that's trivial to set up with Direwolf. I did that before I went down here, and that it takes probably just a few moments to get that config up and running. I think there's a YouTube channel called Modern Ham or something that has, he just started a new series on Packet, and he explains pretty much everything that goes into setting up Direwolf, and just connecting that to the 705 is a trivial matter. So if you have a 705, you can do that on Packet on FM.
Awesome. And since you're reading up on Packet Radio at the moment, Bob, we got to do a show on that at some point as well. But we're 10 minutes over our usual time slot here. So hopefully we have people still watching. But again, George, thank you for coming on. It's been great. And we're going to have you on probably in somewhere before Christmas, talking about the Adventure Radio Protocol. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yep. So that's going to be a lot of fun, and looking forward to having you back on. And if you don't listen to the Ham Radio Workbench podcast, you should do that now. And on that note, 7-3, guys.
73.
73.
Until next